the opportunity to take part. My name is Patrick Moore. I'm a co-founder and 15-year former director of Greenpeace. I'm now chair and chief scientist, Green Spirit Strategies Limited, focused on sustainability, and I'm presently an advisor to New York area. One day when I was doing my PhD in ecology at the University of British Columbia, I read about a little group of people meeting in a church basement in Vancouver, planning a protest against US hydrogen bomb testing. I joined that group and ended up being in the planning and on the first voyage of what became Greenpeace. We convinced President Nixon at the time to end those hydrogen bomb tests. As a matter of fact, that was the last time the United States ever detonated a hydrogen bomb. With that victory behind us, I went on to spend the next 15 years full-time in the front lines of the movement around the world. We got a lot of things right. Stop the bomb, save the whales, stop toxic discharge, etc. But I think we made one serious error. In our enthusiasm focused on nuclear weapons testing and the threat of all-out nuclear holocaust between the Soviet Union and the United States, we made the mistake of lumping nuclear energy in with nuclear weapons as if they were all part of the same holocaust. I think we failed to differentiate between the peaceful and beneficial uses of the technology and the destructive and even evil uses of the technology. If we banned all technologies that could be used for evil purposes, we would never have harnessed fire. A car bomb is made with a car, diesel oil, and fertilizer. Is the best way to stop car bombs to ban diesel oil, fertilizer, and automobiles? No. Think of nuclear medicine for a minute. Nuclear medicine successfully diagnoses and treats millions of people every year. Many of the isotopes used in nuclear medicine come from nuclear reactors, cobalt-60, technetium, and others. I want to talk about the environmental issues. Climate change is the biggest environmental issue today. Many people have come up and made the assertion that nuclear energy is producing a lot of greenhouse gas and CO2 emissions. This is purposefully misleading the public. There are many independent, full life cycle analyses of greenhouse gas emissions from all the different electricity sources. Nuclear plants produce on average 5 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. Solar panels produce 35 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, largely because of the need to extract silicon, which is a very energy-intensive process. Gas plants produce 500 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, 100 times as much as nuclear energy. And coal-fired power plants produce 1,000 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, 200 times as much as nuclear energy. These are facts. This is from the Office of Science and Technology from the Parliament of the United Kingdom. You can also Google the University of Madison, Wisconsin, that has done an independent study of full life cycle CO2 for all power generation sources. Nuclear and hydroelectric are the 2 lowest CO2 emitters of all our technologies. That is partly why New York State is the 5th lowest per capita CO2 emitter in the country, because 45% of its electricity comes from either nuclear or hydroelectric. Vermont and Idaho are the lowest because even more of their electricity is coming from either hydroelectric, as in the case of Idaho, and a combination of hydro and nuclear in the case of Vermont. I'd like to talk about fish for a second. We were told by a member of Riverkeeper that the plant at Indian Point is killing 1 billion fish a year. I don't think there is 1 billion fish in that river. That is a ridiculous thing to say. Meanwhile, their own leader, Bobby Kennedy, said recently, "Today, the Hudson River is the richest body of water in the North Atlantic region, producing more pounds of fish per acre than any other waterway in the Atlantic Ocean north of the equator." That plant has been there for 35 years, while the Hudson River has systematically recovered from a time when 20-mile stretches of it were dead to where Bobby Kennedy is saying it's the most productive river north of the equator in the Atlantic Ocean. I don't understand how those points jive at all. Finally, I'd like to talk about air quality. The mayor of Buchanan made it clear, and so did the National Science Study, National Academy of Science study. There has to be an alternative to the energy at Indian Point if it is shut down. It provides nearly 1/3 of New York's power on some days and runs the whole mass transit system. What are the alternatives to nuclear? Well, I'll tell you one thing, they're not wind and solar. Wind energy has a very useful application in that when the wind is blowing, you can turn off some of the gas peaking plants if you're at peak power requirements. Solar is simply too expensive and will, unless it comes down by 10 times in price, will remain a very minor niche player. But those aren't the reasons that they can't replace Indian Point. It's because they are intermittent and unreliable sources of energy by nature. The sun does not shine at night, the wind does not blow all the time, and therefore they cannot provide baseload electricity to the grid like nuclear, hydro, and fossil fuels can. The only alternative would be gas-fired plants producing 10 million tons more CO2, and it absolutely blows my mind when I hear someone from Riverkeepers, an environmental group, say the words clean natural gas. How is 10 million tons of additional CO2 clean? And how are additional tons of sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxides, and particulate matters clean? It's absolutely logically inconsistent to, on one hand, say shut down Indian Point, and on the other hand, say we're all worried about air pollution and climate change. The only way to keep the air as clean as it is in this state is to keep Indian Point operating safely, cost-effectively, and clean, just like it has been for the last 35 years. Thank you very much.